So today we're jumping into an idea that doesn't start with some big, abstract concept. Nope, it all starts with a single, life-altering moment. A moment of shocking clarity on a football field.
Yeah, that's a pretty intense thing to hear, right? It comes from a guy who, back when he was 17, was this promising football player with a huge dream, but then one day, he sees his teammate go down with a horrific injury, the kind that ends a career in a second. And it wasn't just the shock of it, it was the cold, hard reality of the risk he was taking every single day.
You know, seeing something like that, it just flips the switch in your brain. He suddenly started thinking about opportunity cost. For every single hour he was pouring into this football dream, another future, a future built on a university education, was slowly drifting away. It forced him to ask that brutal question we all have to face at some point. What am I giving up to chase this?
So what does he do? He goes straight to the one person who's seen it all, the team's longtime equipment manager, the guy who's watched waves of hopeful players come and go. And he asks him this one, simple, absolutely devastating question. He needed the real odds, you know? Not the fantasy you tell yourself.
And the answer, a simple, crushing no. That was it. That one word told him everything he needed to know about his most likely future. He quit, right then and there. He walked away from football to focus on university because he realized the price of chasing that nearly impossible dream was just way too high.
Okay, so what's so fascinating here is how this really personal, pragmatic story ties into this huge, complex Turkish concept called Vasat. It's the idea that was secretly driving his entire decision. And believe me, it has some deep and really complicated cultural roots.
So you might be surprised to hear that Vasat originally was actually a positive thing, a really good thing. It meant average in the best possible way, like a healthy heartbeat, a stable system. It stood for balance, for sustainability. A society that was in a state of Vasat was a healthy one.
But like some words do, its meaning started to rot. That positive sense of a healthy average got twisted into something ugly. Vasat came to mean stagnant, idling, decay. It became the word for a society just coasting along, performing way, way below its actual potential.
Which brings up a huge question, right? How does a whole culture get bogged down by this negative version of Vasahila? To get our heads around that, we've got to look back at the heavy psychological weight of history.
Well, it seems to start with this cycle of passivity. First, you have this massive, glorious empire, and it falls. Then its memory hangs over everything, creating this impossible standard that the present can never live up to. And so instead of building something new, society just waits. It waits for some savior figure to come along and bring back the good old days.
This analogy just nails it. The people who inherit this great past can end up acting less like creators and more like passive managers. They get so caught up looking backward at the glory days that they forget to build forward. It creates this kind of cultural paralysis.
Okay, that's the history, the big picture stuff. But what does this culture of good enough actually look like on the ground? How does it pop up in day-to-day life?
Right, and here's the thing you've got to understand. This Vasat mindset, it's not just a passive feeling. It has tactics, it's almost post-truth, hollowing out the meaning of big important words like strategy or democracy until they're just empty shells. It forces you into false choices, flattens out culture, and champions this really reactive, often hypocritical sense of morality.
Think about it like this. Religious conversations can get totally stuck on tiny, superficial questions. Like, does using this specific toothpick break my fast? That kind of debate ends up replacing centuries of deep, profound theological philosophy. The hard questions get pushed aside for easy ones.
And you see this flattening effect in culture, too. The example given is street food being served at a fancy art gallery opening. Now, on the surface, maybe that sounds cool, but what it's really doing is erasing the meaningful distinctions between different cultural spaces until it all just becomes one big, meaningless parody of itself. But here is a real-world example that is just, wow. A famous singer, Ibrahim Tatlıses, who has a documented history of violence against women, was given a Lifetime Achievement Award. And the ceremony took place on December 5th, a day that marks a major milestone for women's rights in Turkey. It's a perfect storm of the hypocrisy and the bizarre contradictions that can thrive in a Vasat culture.
And all of this leads to what might be the single most destructive part of Vasat. It's an idea best explained with this powerful metaphor, the inverted pyramid.
So in a healthy society, you have a normal pyramid, right? You've got your innovators, your geniuses, your best and brightest at the top. They set a high bar, and their excellence pulls the rest of society up. It creates an ambition to be better. But under Vasat, the whole thing gets turned on its head. It inverts. And now you have this huge, heavy base of the average at the top, putting immense pressure on the exceptional few at the bottom, trying to pull them down to their level.
So what happens when the pyramid is upside down? Well, excellence gets told, hey, can you dumb it down a bit? Intellectuals are called arrogant or out of touch. Thoughtful TV shows get no ratings and just disappear. The average stops being the floor you build on and instead becomes a ceiling you're not allowed to break through.
All right, so we've been talking about some pretty big abstract ideas. History, culture, metaphors, but does this stuff have a real-world cost? You bet it does. And it can be summed up in one, frankly, shocking number.
21st. That's where Turkey ranks on the World Misery Index. Now just think about the other countries on that list for a second. We're talking about places dealing with active wars, crippling sanctions, and complete economic collapse.
But here's the core argument, that ranking isn't just about money or resources. It's a symptom of something deeper, a kind of mental misery that's born directly from this culture of Vasat, this acceptance of being far less than you could be.
So, the diagnosis is pretty clear. The problem isn't a lack of talent. It's not a lack of potential. It's a mindset. And the way out? It's about shaking off this good enough, purely benefit-driven attitude and actually daring to aim for something truly great again.
Which really brings us to the heart of it all. This whole idea of Vasat teaches us something universal. Mediocrity, it's not just something that happens. It's a choice. It's a collective choice that a society makes day after day. And that really forces us to look around and ask, in our own companies, in our own communities, in our own lives, what choice are we making?